do you think is more dangerous, racing or street riding?
Definitely street riding is more dangerous.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, there's here we're in a controlled atmosphere. We've got, everybody's going the same direction. We have an ambulance that's ready for us. We're running over the same piece of concrete time after time after time, so we know what's up ahead.
I think the street riding is more dangerous.
Why?
Because they're not watching for bikes on the street. They don't see you. I know so many people that have been hit on the street and hurt really bad.
And on the track, everyone's going the same way, so I think it's a little bit safer out here because everyone's going in the same direction.
I believe street riding is more dangerous than racing.
Why?
The racetrack is more controlled. You know what's on the surface, you know what's coming up, you don't have anybody pulling out in front of you, and on the street, you just never know what's around the next corner.
Oh, definitely the street.
Why?
Well, you have a lot more obstacles. On the track, you have everyone's moving in the same direction than a closed circuit, of course, so you don't have to worry about tractors or dogs running out in front of you, things like that.
Oh, by far street riding.
Why?
I mean, I think probably the main thing is the fact is that you have controlled circumstances on a race course, and on the street you have to deal with oil being in the middle of a turn, possibly sand or gravel or something along those lines, and then also you have to deal with cars, and also if you do have an unfortunate incident to fall off, you have to deal with stationary objects like trees and curbs and things like that, and it's that old cliche, it's not how fast you fall off, it's how fast you stop is what hurts you.
How do you steer a motorcycle?
Well, it's all in countersteering, of course, and it took me a long time to understand what countersteering meant until I was at Daytona one year, and my sponsor told me, which was Don Vesco, told me, well, Dave, yeah, you turn left to go right and right to go left. I said, no, you don't. And he goes, well, try it here at Daytona at the start-finish line. Just turn to the left and see where you go. And I tried that, and I ended up right by the wall. So, I learned real quick about countersteering, how important it is, and it really, it can help you as a rider.
So you better know that if you're a street rider.
Oh yeah, it'll help you in every way.
You steer the opposite way to initiate the turn and go from there.
Like countersteer.
Countersteer, yes. You try to hold the bars just well enough to keep your hands on them. The harder you hold them, the more the bike upsets.
Not real tight that you want to put a strain on your arms, just enough to hang on and so that you feel comfortable and your arms are relaxed.
You want to have somewhat of a loose grip on the handlebars, otherwise your hands get cramped up, you get real tired, you get real tense. If you're not comfortable, then your hands are going to hurt real bad.
In Street Smarts 1, we suggested you use the front brake only to stop your motorcycle. There's much debate now in the motorcycle community as to which works best, a combination of front and a little rear, or all front. One thing everyone does agree upon, though, is do not use the rear to stop the motorcycle. We can't stress that enough. So now listen to the experts and decide what works for you. Which brake or brakes do you use while racing?
Oh, front, always, only.
And for street?
Same. I try to stay away from the rear brake all the time.
I use the front brakes primarily. I think they put two brakes on a motorcycle, so I think that the back brake has a purpose, but all that I use it for, if I'm heavy on the front end, I'll use the back lightly just to settle the back, to keep the weight down on the back.
Now in a street situation, which brakes would you use?
It's primarily I use still a lot more of the front. I'd say 80% of the front is what I use.
Mostly the front brakes.
Which brake or brakes would you use on the street?
Front brakes.
I always use both brakes, and the reason for that is because the front brake controls 70% of your braking power, and the back brake, the rear brake, controls about 30%. And although I would not recommend using the rear brake out on the racetrack because it is something that's very difficult to control and requires a lot of concentration and ability, out on the street, if you need to stop quickly, you want to use the braking power of both brakes.
Do you find it hard in a panic stop to monitor rear brake traction while the front brake is on hard?
No, I don't.
Is it hard to monitor rear brake traction while you have the front brake on?
Oh, I would say it's not impossible, but sure, it's harder to monitor. And if you have all that weight pitched forward on the motorcycle by using the front brakes real heavy, rear end's real light, has a tendency to want to lock up, and then if the rear wheel locks up, all your attention goes to the rear end of the motorcycle and not what's out in front of you.
But in an emergency, would you recommend both brakes?
No, I would recommend using the front and downshifting.
How do you practice braking?
Passing other riders?
Well, I think a lot of times, see, because I race, I can practice different racing techniques at a race course. I run one of the schools now, and I tell guys if we have a real sharp hairpin turn on one of the racetracks, just use that, how you have to apply the brakes on this hairpin turn as if some little old lady had pulled out in front of you on the street someplace.
In a parking lot, and I practice it quite often. I take my bike to the extent that that front brake can brake it, bring it up to speed, and you've got to start at a very low speed. You don't want to start too fast, because then you're going to be riding over your head, and there's a chance that you can lock up the front brake and not remember what to do. And of course, if you did lock up the front brake, you'd want to release it immediately.
Or what?
Or you'll fall down because the front tire will turn in, and you'll do a nosedive.
Now here's a shot of that very same thing happening. Watch number 3. He goes into the corner with the brake on, the front brake on. And as you can see, you don't want to do that. You could have avoided that by getting off the brakes a little bit earlier. Here's another example of the same thing. You do not want to be on the brakes going into a corner. That's Rich Oliver, formerly USA champion, on one of Kenny Roberts' 500cc GP bikes. That's an expensive mistake. How important is throttle control?
It's very important. With throttle control, what you want to try to do is maintain the RPMs, keep the bike nice and settled by just rolling it on smoothly. What you find, if you're too abrupt with the throttle, you get a lot of jerkiness. The bike starts to tend to act funny. If you roll it on nice and smooth, it helps your drives coming out of the corner. The smoother you are, the faster you go.
Throttle control in racing is really important. The smoother you are, the faster you can go. If you're real erratic on the throttle, it makes the suspension on the bike feel like it's not working. So it's real critical. And I do a lot of dirt bike riding to work on my throttle control, which I think really helps.
On the street, you really have to know your motorcycle. Some bikes are more forgiving than others, but if you get on a ZX11 and you don't have good throttle control, you're in the ground.
Throttle control along with brake control are the two most important things. Throttle control has to be very smoothly done. If you find somebody that comes off a corner and grabs a whole handful all at once, they aren't in full throttle control. They don't have an idea what they're doing. It should be nice and smooth movements compared to real radical ones.
Well, it's all about throttle control. You know, everything you do is about throttle control.
Across number 27, the guy who crashed early in the race, Chuck Graves down the inside. Graves through! Graves goes through and takes the lead back from Rich Oliver on his Marlboro Team Roberts YZR 500. Chuck Graves pulls a big wheelie in celebration.
Here we are on board with Chuck Graves at Brainerd International Raceway. You can see and hear how he uses the throttle. How do you practice throttle control?
Well, again, the best way to practice anything is experience. So you get out and you go to your favorite part of Canyon Road or go to a racetrack and you practice being smooth with the throttle.